Hey, Dr. Bhamidi.
Hey, Omkar.
So you know all the stuff we did with SVM, I was actually able
Mm-hmm.
to apply that to my research quite immediately, and my
Okay.
AI is able to characterize several common radiation signatures now of electronic components. It was actually a
Okay.
huge
Oh, very
step. I'd
cool.
been stuck for about a month until we covered that.
Okay. Okay. That's very nice. So actually useful stuff. Okay.
Yeah.
That's okay. Great to hear. Thanks. Thanks for telling me.
Also, I believe I've convinced several of my other undergraduate physics uh, peers to take this class in the future
Cool.
because they've seen as much use I've gotten out of it. So you got some free marketing too.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think I should have mentioned I started the semester with much higher ambitions, and it's just this whole pandemic thing means I couldn't cover all that I could have. So maybe the way to phrase this is, in a normal year, it would have been even more awesomer, but unfortunately, wasn't as awesome. But yeah, that's life. But yeah, thank you. Thanks again.
Is there a more advanced version of this class that UNC offers?
So not more. I mean, so there are more. Let's call this sort of class maybe like a general introduction to machine learning. And so there's Store offers this, and then there's a slightly different version that CS offers. Actually, very different that CS offers. But then there are more advanced versions of this. So for not advanced versions, but advanced topics like natural language processing and deep learning and stuff. And CS offers these courses. And then there's a so similar in line to this course, namely a whole general dealing generally with lots of different ideas in machine learning, but more on the math end and trying to really get to are your techniques accurate in some settings, etc. There's a graduate level store course that we offer
Oh,
on
what are
similar
the
topics.
prerequisites for that?
That one I think would be maybe mathematical statistics, which is store 555, I think. So
Mm,
just so that one has some understanding of, sorry, a deeper understanding of, say, probabilistic models. And yeah, I think that's the main prereq.
that's unfortunate then. Next semester is my last semester, and I have to fill my schedule somehow because I'm out of classes to take.
Mhm.
So I was looking at interesting graduate classes.
I see, I see. Yeah, okay, I'll keep that in mind. I'll let you know if I can, yeah, if something comes to mind.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. Oh, hey, Lisha, are you online?
I am. I am. How are you doing? All right.
Oh, good, good, good. Okay.
No video. There you go. Real person.
Okay.
I
Yeah,
knew
yeah,
it.
yeah. Great to see you. Yeah, so okay. So this is great. I just told all this. So there's like an annoying poll here, which I do to take attendance, so you can ignore that. But
Yeah. Such a test whether we're a bot or not.
yes.
So correct grammar. Oh my God. So subtle. Or maybe not as subtle, but still. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So again, thank you so much. It's a pleasure to have you. And in general, it's with all of us moving online, it's I think a big advantage for people like me because I can freely it'll send you a free email and ask your time and effort and all that stuff without giving you anything in return. So,
Yeah.
there's like, you can't come and visit me or like interact with all the cool group here and so on. So it's slightly annoying. So because of this, I really appreciate you joining us. So I think I'll just start with just an introduction for the rest of the class here. You're the founder and CEO of Rosebud AI, working on cutting edge machine learning techniques for image analysis and video creation. You're back, I guess Rosebud AI is backed by a whole bunch of people. So Balaji Srinivasan, who I don't know personally, but for some reason I was following him on Twitter, and I think, anyway, he seems to really think deeply about life in general. And so when I saw him freaking out about COVID in February, that was when I started freaking out about COVID in February. Our main, I guess, overlap is one of your thesis co-advisors is Professor Aldous, who I was also advised by him. And we met, I think, for the first time in a conference in Cambridge, where I guess David was also there.
Oh my God, a lifetime away, right? Academia.
Yeah, lifetime
for me
away.
at least. Yeah.
Yeah, and maybe I can tell you a little bit my own, why I'm super curious. So both of us know David Aldous, who's maybe one of the great probabilists of this generation.
Yeah.
And so I talked to him every few months, and then he often mentioned how amazed he was with like both how you managed to work at Berkeley, and then like immediately after graduating, like the amount of your ability in doing all these cool things in startups for machine learning and stuff. And he's a person who doesn't get easily impressed. So for a long time, I
didn't know this too, to be quite honest. So it's very, it's like, when you hear that your advisor says something like good about you, you feel like super proud. It just feels like they're a parent. Yeah. So thank you for sharing.
Yeah. So he would whenever we talk about life in general and all that stuff and students and stuff, he would always be like, yeah, Alicia, it's amazing how she's done this, blah blah blah. And I'm like, wow. So I wanted to know a little bit more. So this is sort of what motivated me to reach out and sort of set this up. So okay, so let's just slowly start here. So maybe you could tell us a little bit about your own background, what got you interested in math, I guess, in general, and then leading to a PhD at Berkeley.
Yeah, wow. Okay, so I'm hailing from Toronto, and that's also where I did my undergrad. And they have a pretty, it was a really great pure math program, but I didn't actually go into college thinking I'd do math. I wasn't sort of one of those people who like specialize in anything in high school, just did a lot of different things that I was interested in, anywhere from the arts to like I was doing IB. But then once I came to college, I thought, okay, maybe international relations would be something to draw in all those eclectic interests. I think big mistake. So first semester, I just realized it was not only depressing, but I was like, I didn't really like at least the format of like studying political science. I didn't feel, and this is much maybe more of a personality or some kind of like preference in my brain for a different type of like academic study, because it just felt like discourse was fine, but we're not getting at truth. and I also didn't think that it was like necessary maybe to study it in class in order to still engage those interests. And so somehow I was taking this like a really fun probability course. And by fun, I mean like it hinted at different like ways of doing proofs that I didn't expect, or I just didn't do before. And it just happened to be in that course. And I stumbled eventually into realizing that the math program was like extremely well done at Toronto. And also I could like maybe do more theoretical physics with like more of the math background. So that was also one of the things I wanted to like be able to comprehend. And so I was like, okay, math is really hard. I need to like actually understand this in order to understand all of these other things. And then I just like jumped into it full force, and then realizing that like, oh, I'm kind of behind. And in order to do pure mathematics, you have to actually like learn topology and abstract algebra. And so like there was just like no breather room after that, jumping into the math program. I think like on an interest level, it just was like the more I learned about it, the more I was like, wow, this is like an entire, like I think first mathematicians, they're sort of like drawn into it because they think like Platonism, like you're actually just discovering these structures that have some like they can transcend, lifetimes and they're really true. And of course, then you start developing more of a sophisticated view as to like, oh, well, there's a lot of different ways that you can formulate questions and define objects. So like maybe that like level of, there's definitely human influence there, but it's like, it it remains super interesting after delving in for those like philosophical reasons as well.
Cool. This I might be mistaken. Maybe I misheard this, but so did you come to Berkeley to one of the best math department, probably, yeah, one of the best math departments in the world. So did you come there initially planning to do a PhD in logic, which is also one of the most abstract of all math subjects?
I did, yeah. No, it's a good reminder because I basically, you know, I was looking for programs that, because it's like not, I did math and then I also did a little bit of like foundational, like philosophy and mathematics in Toronto. And so this was one of the programs I applied to that was like a rare intersection of the two. And yeah, I agree, you know, very kind of grateful to have like gotten to the best place to probably study that. And so like the backdrop to that was because I was doing mathematics and I was also very curious and interested in these foundational questions from a philosophical point of view. And so I had that background coming in, and it was like a very good fit as a result. But yeah,
Cool.
no, I spent some time there. Obviously I didn't stay in the department. It was I guess like here's the thing. I think studying math is one kind of thing, and then like math academia is like a total different rat race. And so once I got into Berkeley and started meeting some of the upperclassmen, I just realized that like a lot of them are like, and you know, no, this is just the reality of the situation. A lot of them are like pretty unhappy, and it's just because like the job prospects are just like dismal within mathematics. And so you would have to do a lot of things that like maybe don't even like, you know, you're not even doing research in like the area that you truly think is interesting because you have to still have employability concerns. And I was like, well, what's the point of that? I mean, the whole sacrifice in academia is to do what you're, you know, interested in. And then concurrent to that, I was also just like, you know, this is the first time that I was in, I mean, you know, the Bay Area, and therefore started actually thinking about tech. Because before it was all like very tunnel vision, like, oh, this is, you know, so, you know, being in academia is a way to explore and express my interests. But yeah, I did an internship at Pinterest, and that really opened my eyes to like, just, you know, you can do interesting technical work, but that is like applications driven. I think also just having been at Pinterest when they were only 600 people, and just seeing the impact and growth was really exhilarating for me. I've never kind of been in a situation where it's like, oh, you can actually produce a product that touches like, you know, millions, if not like billions of people. Like that was a really different, yeah, it was like a very different kind of cadence to things. And also building things was like much more, like it was an exposure to like, oh, this is what you can do. And so that's kind of what drove, you know, like me leaving the math department, but then also like, I saw what was happening in deep learning, and that's, you know, when I like working with David was very natural because of like my probability background, actually. I come from Toronto, but then eventually it just also made sense because that was a lot of what was happening in machine learning too. So I'm really happy David was very supportive of all those explorations.
Very cool. So so how did you so after you graduated, so what was your path to your current position? So what were like the sequence of steps? I mean, sorry, you don't have, yeah.
No, it's okay. I was just like trying to retrace them myself. Yeah. So okay, what I think this would have to like go into some detail of like what was even happening the last couple of years. So I think so I interned in Pinterest in 2015. So this was still earlier on. I graduated in 2017. Then I did another internship in Stitch Fix the summer after. And I think by then I was like pretty convinced I wasn't going to stay in academia. And it's just like you know, it was just the same kind of thing I was saying. It's like, although I was very interested in the things that, you know, I get to study and do research on, I think the pace of like being able to build something just opened my eyes into like these other interests of mine and how I can kind of execute on that. And so, so actually knowing that you're not going to have to find an academic job is actually kind of a relief because then you don't have to go through all of because I'm sure, you know, it's a lot of work. So, you know, kudos to you. But I think, yeah. And then at that point, it was just like thinking about, okay, then what are the things that I can do after, you know, graduating? Well, there's like obvious like research positions you can I applied to. At the time, I was also working with Joanne. So I was looking at, Joanne Bruna, who was a assistant prof at the time, and he focused on like graph neural networks. And so, you know, exploring on the deep learning side, you can you can still do research, but you get to be part of these like big research labs like in Brain and OpenAI and, and Facebook, and they do cool stuff. So I was definitely looking at those opportunities. And then something happened where my husband and my boyfriend at the time was, he was actually, he had an interesting path because he like we met in the math PhD, and then he dropped out right away, worked for a startup, and then was at Square. And so at that point in his life, he actually ended up going to the GSB, so Graduate School of Business in Stanford. And so I had this like fun time the last 2 years where I was actually living with him on campus there, just as like a totally different experience. And so was introduced to just like more, just like other professions I didn't even know anything about. So like investing, right? Like people have heard what investing is about. Total black box as to like what they actually do, especially venture capitalists. And so like I got to like learn a little bit more about like what that's about, especially early stage investing. It amounted to like, okay, there was, I saw an opportunity there where there was a lot of interest in technical founders, and in particular ones that had knowledge of deep learning, because the job of early stage investors, especially if you're doing seed stage investing, is to kind of like be able to invest in these best teams who can like build companies that end up being like, worth more than $1 billion. And so the light that was kind of shining on what might be a comparative advantage for me is like, this is a relatively new area. Not a lot of people maybe understand the actual like technical details here, nor do they even have like the network of like knowing who are the actual good like technical people. And a lot of them come out from these PhD programs and work in the labs. And so I was able to bring something to the table, even though I didn't have any investing experience. And quite frankly, for early stage, unlike growth stage or later stage, you're not really like crunching numbers, because there are no numbers there to see in terms of like, oh, what's your like CAC and like your growth and all that stuff like that. There are no numbers there. Sometimes this is pre-product. Oftentimes it's pre-product, looking at the stage now. And so you really are evaluating the team and having like practice and judging good areas and seeing, like whether the team are the right people to execute on something. So that's how I got into like knowing what investing is about. And then I ended up talking to a bunch of firms. This is, stop me if you have questions, but basically this is right before I was graduating. And so it's like, okay, I could do the usual, like I did a bunch of data science internships. I can certainly try to be a data scientist. I also had some product interests. So there's like very straightforward paths there. So it just felt like, okay, that's a safe thing and definitely very interesting. And then there was investing, which like there was like some weird gatekeepers in the sense that like, it's not like anybody can get an investing job, but it didn't feel like it was hard. It was just more like you had to figure out what was that game, and it's not, and it's not like game in a sense that like people are trying to play a game. It's just like, I think most things in this world just have to figure out like how do you like, what are the things that people have to jump through in order to like play in this area. And so investing just happened to be like, you have to figure out what's your comparative advantage in like getting people like the best deals. And so in deep learning, there was an obvious comparative advantage. And so I just like talked with a bunch of folks and made sure that there was like a good fit in terms of the role that was offered. So was it like an actual real investment job? And I can go into detail what that means. Like you basically have like different levels there. You have real carry, which is like economic incentive, and there's like career progression. And I found a really great fit in Amplify Partners, which only focused on technical founders and was very early stage. And that's how I jumped into it, because the opportunity released itself.
Very cool. So maybe let me just pivot a little bit to, I guess, a question I had. So because of your just previous discussion. And so this is related to, so how are there some general things that you think about or that you've seen that lead to good companies or good ventures? I know this is a very vague question. So maybe let me tell you why I'm asking this. So the first time I met, David Aldous, so in terms of research in math, there's a similar question, like what kinds of problems should you work on? And so the way that he told me in my first meeting, I told this to the class. So he said, okay, you want to work with me? Most people do research in the following way. He drew a big circle on the board. And then he said, everyone stays at the boundary of research and they try to push outwards. And he said, this is, there are too many people there. I don't like being with the rest of the crowd. So he then drew a point way outside the circle. And he said, I try to move away from what everyone else is doing and then slowly come back to the circle, which is the main body of, say, probability.
Yeah.
So, so sort of this is maybe why I'm asking this
I
question.
remember him. I mean, he didn't draw that circle for me, but I do remember him kind of like, yeah, helping teach us like what is like his research kind of like philosophy and strategy. And it makes a lot of sense. Yeah, like finding his like comparative advantage there, and he's able to produce such like original things because of that approach.
Right. So are there similar things that you've seen in terms of either in directly or your experience of things with regards to like successful companies, like tech companies? Like, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah,
Feel
no,
free.
for sure.
Yeah.
It's a great question. And actually it's still kind of like a relevant thing I think about, because even though I'm like, full-time working on my own startup, one of the things I got to sort of keep as an activity is that when I left Amplify, they carved out a smaller like scout fund just for me to kind of continue investing other founders. And so I definitely still think about this. And it's much nicer when you're writing small angel checks because you're not competing to lead a deal. And we can, we can table that discussion on why it's like a more fun experience. But yeah, I think there's a couple, I would say like that analogy maps directly, or at least it's like a high priority in terms of like, how you think about the originality of an approach. But one of the things that would make a founder's life like easier. Actually, no, put it this way. I think it's, unless somebody started with a very specific problem, it's very often the case that people would end up pivoting and like continue refining the product. I think that's very natural. There's actually not even anything wrong with that. And I'll just like give us, an example in terms of like YC. It's like if you sort of look at, I did Y Combinator last summer. If you start at the beginning of the summer and the end of the summer, I think most people, they not only are they pivoting on the product, it's like they were consumer startups, turn into enterprise startups, turn to B2B, and that's fine. And the reason like you have this observation is that within like the startups that are continually trying to solve a real problem and finding not only a problem that's like helping, that's like a real problem for a certain group of people, but then thinking about like, is this a scalable problem? Because like, that's what would make high growth. This is like why software products are like really investable. Of course, that's a huge area. So like, what does that mean? Well, like not only is this like some problem that people actually have, are they willing to pay for it? Or are there some network effects that can be gained by like a lot of people using your solution? Like there needs to be some kind of like flywheel effect to drive growth here and advantage. And so I think from a founder level, what you have to evaluate is like, does the founder, like, are they the kind of person that's going to be very determined to like, okay, if this doesn't work out for the many reasons that a product isn't going to work out, or like like things that go wrong in a startup, they're still like very focused on like refining that problem space and like thinking through productization. And rather, I think this is also something that, and myself included as a technical founder, we have to be very wary of, because there could be like really sexy technical solutions, but you have to prioritize accordingly of like not making it a research thing either, because it just has to like translate well into product. And sometimes that might mean like not doing very like novel things from a research point of view, but like productizing the right way. I always like to kind of think about examples like Calendly or Typeform, which is like clearly not like billion-dollar companies, but like I think for purposes of this discussion, it's like very clear there's no like innovative thing there, but it's like they solved a problem so well, and it was so common that it's like it's a great product. And I kind of like love looking at case studies like that to drive myself to think in this way.
Cool. Okay, that's super, super useful. So, and maybe just a small pivot there as well. I mean, do you find distinctions in terms of like intrinsic versus extrinsic motivations in terms of like these ventures? Maybe the example is, do you typically see people are very motivated by success and money, which obviously is important, or typically are successful venture firms more driven by, okay, there's a problem that we really want to solve, and if we get all these associated benefits of money and fame and so on, that's great.
Yeah.
Are there?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. I think it's like some convex combination of the two, maybe some other points as well. And it really depends on the personality, but it's like you kind of will, with you kind of like see, and there's always imperfect information. So I'm only kind of talking from my experience, but it's definitely not a problem if people are driven by success. But the thing is, if they're kind of working on something that they don't really want to spend extra time thinking on, it's like not an interest area, then they're at a disadvantage. And so that's that, because there's somebody else who is probably going to be funded who is as driven not only by the interest and also the success of it, and who's going to like just spend more cycles thinking through it and be more fanatic. And so I think that's why it's like really key to like have, you know, it's like this is a problem space that really makes sense for a certain person to work on. Sometimes it doesn't translate into just like, oh, okay, this is an interest from a level of like intellectual curiosity. It might just be like, well, I've solved this problem before. I've like been in, you know, like a large company where I've like tried to solve it internally. I know all the ways that we should be solving it, but it's not being solved because of X, Y, and Z reasons. So I want to make a general solution. So that person's like kind of de-risked, you know, having maybe a really good perspective and knowledge of executing. And so that's, I think in that sense, like that's also okay. But like, yeah, if somebody, I think in YC, when a lot of people are pivoting, they're always like pushing you to, because it's like a journey for doing a startup. It's like never 1 year. I mean, if it is, then it, you know, like that's how it fails likely. And so you have to kind of expect that, like, is this something that I'm going to really enjoy thinking about? And the customers I would enjoy spending a lot of time with in the next 5 years. And if that's a resounding yes for you, then you have a much higher chance of success.
Cool. Yeah, sorry, I just kind of diverted a little bit. Super interesting. So maybe I can now switch to like, so what does your current work look like? So what does a typical day look like? What are you currently involved in?
Yeah. Oh my goodness. With COVID, it's been, so actually before COVID, we're already distributed. So in that sense, it's been totally fluid, like nothing, you know, it's like, we didn't have to adjust that much, but like, yeah, typical day is I try to not have many meetings, but somehow they end up in my calendar. And it's like, all right, gotta power through. No, it's good. I mean, it's actually, I really like the distributed style of doing, because I think you can get so many meetings, you know, in a day without having to like account for travel and all those things. So I think it's super efficient. Yeah, my meetings are usually either like talking to customers, understanding like a feature that we're developing, whether that's going to yeah, like it's going to translate into some like broader roadmap of products that we're developing, and so there's a lot of like trying to get first order evidence there, and then I'm like also talking to the team, and they're in the US, and actually some are also in Europe, about 5 people, so not that many that we have to correspond with, and so we keep a pretty asynchronous kind of work style. Follow a lot of the tips that's given by GitLab, which I think is great. They publish this like remote work manual that's open source, and everyone sort of tries to take some cues from there, because they're one of the bigger companies who've successfully done fully distributed teams. And so that means, you know, maybe like, well, we were kind of doing daily check-ins. Now we do maybe Mondays and Wednesdays. And so a lot of it just has to do with like defining a sprint on Monday of like, what are the features that need to be developed? Some of them are product oriented, some of them are just, you know, longer technical things that we're smoothing through. And then making sure everyone's on board with the prioritizations. And then we'll do another check-in on Wednesday to see how things are going, if the prioritization is shifted. I think most software-based stuff is maybe on a 2-week sprint, but in our case, these kind of meetings also double as like a way for the team to just like know who else is working on what, so we make sure that we're kind of solving each other's problems in the right order. And then, yeah, we have also a Thursday lunch meeting. It's kind of social, play Among Us sometimes. Today, it's actually a research seminar, so it's kind of interesting. We mix it up. So somebody read a paper on basically how to convert GANs for images into video. And so it's like about how do you kind of like traverse the latent space in a temporally consistent way that you can get like 2 models for the price of 1 kind of thing. And so we're looking into it. So yeah, it's fun. I think like it's also energizing to be able to adapt kind of research quickly because you're driven more so by the product application. And so there's a very specific set of problems that you can kind of, push those towards. I think especially for GANs and like image synthesis and those kind of problems, it's a little bit, I would say, is easier the right word? It's just like that way you can, because it's like there's not a very consistent measure of quality for GAN output. You're basically just like, is this good or is this not good? So like having a very objective problem that you're trying to solve for people makes that question easier to formulate. I think is that
cool.
That's what I'm trying to say. So yeah, I think the days they're not exactly like a stationary distribution of days, but a lot of meetings, you're trying to get customer calls, I'm trying to juggle many hats too, because nowadays I don't write much code at all, but I still like keep up with all the papers so that we can, I can like kind of figure out with the team what are the things that we want to develop features in, that I see an opportunity based on my customer conversations, and then just keep on refining the product.
Cool. So is there like one specific something that you're super excited about that you can tell us? You don't have to tell us, who you're working with or exactly.
Yeah. I mean, it's not in stealth. I think I think most pre-A companies are pre-product market fit in the sense that like people release a bunch of different products, but like until you're really, you found the right persona and you're kind of like flywheel, just like needing to go to market, then you're pre-product market fit. So in our case, it's, the North Star for me when I started Rosebud, like almost 2 years ago now, is that a lot of these techniques are going to be super useful to lower the friction to creating visual content. And so this means videos, this means photos, and more, I think, structurally speaking, that allows people to tell stories in a way that's kind of like, you imagine something and then you can communicate at this like high quality level. And so that was very inspiring for me. And it, I think the first few products, I put it in the marketing space because it was very easy to validate. Like people had clear problems there. And so I wanted to solve the technical risk of like, can we actually, create these models that maybe swap faces or create these models to like adjust, these like stock photos, and then be able to like deploy in a solution that's scalable. So a lot of it was just kind of like de-risking the infrastructure and then just finding some application where we can validate faster. I think as we continued on, I wanted to always like include more video components, and also like, what do I mean by this, like, reducing the friction to storytelling? Well, it's like there's different products with narrative structure. I mean, this could be as simple as, Instagram posts or stories, or it could be all the way to like interactive gaming. And so on the abstracted level, we have these composable, like synthesized components of images of, people and videos of people being able to talk with just text input. But then on the product level, we're kind of doing combinations of like, how do we put these features together in an end product that is really easy to use and like solves an existing problem much better, or like makes available a solution that's just like not available previously. And so a couple of those products end up, so one that we're testing very heavily right now is called Talking Heads. And basically, you can do input text or input like voice, and then be able to get an animation of a character in seconds. And so this character just needs to have, like, you just need to have a photo of the actual character. So it could be anything from like something in Disney to like an actual real person. And then you'd be able to kind of like make them speak. So as you can imagine, that's kind of like a toy feature. But the way that we've chosen to explore productization is anywhere from like a streamlined like promotional kind of post to like making available an API to do some, actually, yeah, some of the inbound has been for like educational purposes, where they want to do, I don't know, like a high volume app where you're generating a lot of these videos and personalized interactions, and they need to be able to animate the speaking as well. So that's another example, but like all of them sort of share similar technical requirements. So make sure that we're kind of building those technical things, but then like finding the best application ourselves and then kind of scaling it up.
Okay, very cool. So it looks like, I mean, the stuff that you have to constantly master the state of the art in this area too, because things move so quickly in terms of like machine learning skills and stuff. So okay.
Yeah.
Super cool. So I guess, what is the best thing you like about your job, and then obviously the worst thing?
Ooh. Yeah. It's so going from investor to founder, like I knew what I was signing up for. So it was almost like I wanted to, like I almost like didn't, it's like, it's not that I didn't want to do it, but I'm like, okay, now that I'm doing this, it's like I know this is going to be hard. So I wouldn't say it's like always rosy, but the thing that I feel really grateful for is just like having really, been in the Bay Area and opened my eyes to like, oh wow, you can actually like try to, if you have a vision for like what should exist in the world, you can have an opportunity to build it. Like that's incredible. I feel like super grateful for that. So I think in that sense, that's like the best. And that's why I'm also like, I think, be very honest, like leaving investing, I was like a huge financial like windfall that I was kind of like leaving. But I just didn't, it's not that I don't care about the money. It was just sort of like, I couldn't resist like, wow, you get to build something that's like much more like is suited for like what I want to do. And so I had to kind of do that. So even though there's like many ups and downs, I would say that in terms of the worst thing, it's like, oh, there's going to be stuff that don't work out, or like you're going to kind of like, you're always learning in terms of like how to experiment faster, how to productize faster and in the most efficient way. And so that lends itself to just, there's just a lot of things that you have to handle. And also being a solo founder, you're kind of like emotionally trying to be very like, you have to kind of like guide the morale of the group as well. But because like I get to like build these cool things, I think that's what really drives me, because I feel like it's like a position I'm super grateful to be in. And yeah, I mean, it's definitely a fairly raw space. I think there's very clear things I want to build in the interactive, like visual storytelling side. That's not completely announced, but that's just so interesting because you get to actually bring in the research, but then you're also like productizing, and you're probably one of the first people doing it. So it feels kind of artistically expressive as well.
Very cool. So I guess would would an analogy be it's almost like having a kid or something, like having a startup? Because I was just thinking, yeah, I know. So yeah, I recently had a kid, and of course now I suddenly feel all this pressure that I have to be careful with what I say and so on. I was just telling the class like a week ago, I unfortunately made the mistake of continuously seeing news over the last few months. And every time I see the news, I would be like, what the F? And unknowingly, my son picked up this, and he's 2.5 years old, and he walks around daycare saying, what the F, without quite knowing it, which is kind of embarrassing. So one has to be on. So there are the pros and cons of having to, I don't know, be on your game all the time, I guess.
You mean for the team. That's definitely right. I mean, one thing that makes it a little bit like nicer is, or rather it's not just like you handling it, it's like you get to talk to other founders. And I love that part of like, actually haven't been through YC, because like obviously you can meet other founders other ways. And I have those founder friends, but like YC kind of batches you guys together. And so there's just like a million things. I think that network is probably one of their best, more like unspoken features. It's not about, them, it's not about demo day only. It's not just about like just being in YC. I think it's just like that network of other founders who are going through the same things that you are, or there's like founders who are like a couple stages above you, can give you great advice. And yeah, it's a fairly active community.
Cool.
Yeah.
Okay, so I guess we'll slowly wind down with maybe some general like career suggestions maybe you might have for students. So let's start with, so suppose you could go back before your undergraduate education. Is there anything you would change or redo?
Before my undergrad? I think,
I mean, or even undergrad.
Undergrad. I think undergrad was, well, here's the thing. For some reason, I was like really adverse to learning to code. And this is maybe like most people aren't exposed to it before undergrad, and that's like totally fine. I mean, in my case, it was just strange because my parents happened, like, especially, my dad, he was doing software engineering. So he had all these like really old books from, not old, like it was the 90s at the time. So you can like kind of date me, but like the books looked really boring. And so I thought, well, because my parents are doing it, it's probably really boring. And so for some reason, I just shut that out of my mind. Like, I'm not going to learn how to code. And then, I literally, so I just wish I just like learned earlier, because I think I would have actually enjoyed it had I not, had such a mental block on that. But otherwise, I think I actually had a great childhood. I mean, I probably also just have a a memory for things that like colors it more rosy. I mean, was a first generation immigrant. I moved to Canada when I was 6. And so like, you know, I kind of saw my parents like work hard and you know, I'm like got a better life for the family. And so that was just, I think I'm just grateful for having watched the juxtaposition of coming from like not very much and then kind of seeing, I mean, especially in Canada, it was like a great environment to kind of build up as an immigrant family. And so I think that was really good.
Cool.
Yeah.
So, I mean, regarding coding, when did you dive headfirst into coding?
Oh my God, it wasn't even an undergrad, which is so embarrassing too, because I was in Toronto, right? So this is like, I've known a lot of the people who, I mean, right now are sitting at, yeah, because like they were Jeff Hinton students. It was like the same time that I was there. And somehow, and this is a little bit of hubris because I was really into math at the time. And so I don't know if I mean, you probably know this phenomenon, Shankar, when you're like, when people are in pure math, they think that it's like the apotheosis of like all academia. So like, oh, even the physicists aren't pure enough. And so like, of course I'm not gonna like learn to code because that's just like, that's like, what is that even? That's not an academic study. And so I kind of lost my opportunity to just like take these courses. But actually, to be honest, I think even some of the people who are like really could have been learning under Hinton at the time. I mean, Ilya obviously was learning under Hinton, but like, I'm pretty sure Andre was not doing neural nets until like later as well. So maybe don't feel like so bad, but at least he was coding. I mean, yeah, that would have been useful. No, I think only when I got to Berkeley and then I was like, oh, actually tech is really cool. I could like build stuff and learn to code. This is totally different. This is not grunt work. So, and then after that, my kind of worldview on that changed.
Well, that's great. You know, that means like old people like me can also start learning how to code at some point.
If I could do it, you could do it. Yeah. No, I mean, for sure. It's and the other thing is, you know, I don't want this to only be like learn to code. It's more like maybe if you have biases, try to examine why they were formed because it might not have been. So, you know, I was like very confident. I had like really principled views on that, and it just turned out not to be not to translate into something that was useful. So I'm like, okay. But I don't regret studying math though. I mean, like all of that time, I think it really helped formulate thinking about structures and actually having the tenacity to work on problems that are open. I think this is something that doing a PhD, it's like, it's not obvious to people who haven't, you know, even being in academia or just done research, right? Maybe you don't have to have done a PhD, but there's something about like, oh, I don't know if this problem has a solution that kind of forces you to be very systematic about approaching this. It becomes very obvious to us at some point, but like actually even in solving things within the company, I realize I have to kind of really encourage that kind of structured thinking. Yeah.
I guess, and as you mentioned, I guess the perseverance to go for months, you know, in the face of, you know, obstacles that you don't know if you can solve. Yeah, exactly. You're right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I guess, so I'll ask one question and then see if anyone else has questions. So for, let's say, an undergraduate student or even a graduate student who's, say, generally interested in machine learning and its applications, let's say they're maybe doing masters or, you know, undergraduate or something, is there any other general advice you would give them? Like, you know, learn deep learning today or learn coding yesterday or something?
Actionable, right? Yesterday part. And probably a lot of people already do this, but if you're really learning it and like want to build stuff, then just like make projects available online. Like, you know, try to make working projects that you've open source. It not only gets you exposure, but like it's pretty fun to be building real things. And I think that once you establish some track record of doing that, like that's how people will find you as well. And you can get collaborators and other, you know, depending on whether the interest later on is like to work at a company versus build a startup, et cetera. Like people will see that. And I kind of see this in my own kind of like looking at candidates as well to hire, or just like even looking at other people who I'm considering funding for startups, it's like if they've kind of exposed and communicated the projects that they've worked on, they've actually focused on like deliverables. I think especially in this machine learning area, that's very helpful. I mean, this even applies to the research side for people who communicated their research results very well and made that accessible online. Because like think about it also as a teaching resource too, right? And so people appreciate that. So even if you don't have novel research, if you're just like doing a really good job explaining an area that's interesting for you, you publish those results. I would say there's a lot of value you're delivering there. And so people are thankful for it. And then also you get a lot of kind of like, you get attribution for putting it out there in the world.
Cool. Okay, that's super useful. And right. So I guess putting up things on like some of your products on things places like GitHub or a web page or something, and showing people the stuff that you've done. Okay,
Yeah.
cool. Okay, no, that's super useful. Something I hadn't thought of. Okay, so maybe I think I will end here, and I'll just see if there are any questions. I don't want to keep you too long, but I just want to see if there are any questions from our audience here. Let's see. Omkar says, I don't know if she is. I think maybe Omkar, maybe can we ask some questions now? We still have maybe 8 minutes.
Yeah, I have some questions I can ask now, but it's also, I don't know what your schedule is like, but I have a rather long line of questioning because I find myself kind of in the same situation that you were towards the end of your undergrad. And because of situations and stuff, I've like a lot to ask, and I don't want to keep everyone else here for a long time or hold up your schedule.
Yeah, but maybe, I don't want to keep Professor Dr. Lee too much here. I mean, in principle, maybe you could email me some questions and I could like, take a hack at that and send her some of the questions. But maybe is there one question you could ask? Like one specific question?
Yeah, so for me at least, I find myself a little lost in terms of connecting what I am learning to what I can do with it in like sort of the private sector, like outside of academia, because at least at UNC, we're kind of in this academic bubble. And I feel like I'm learning a lot of useful things, but I don't necessarily see where I can use those. And when I'm looking around like on LinkedIn for stuff, because now I'm in my senior year looking to graduate and get a job or look about further education. And it's just kind of overwhelming with like all of the different things that are coming around. And how would you go about like sort of narrowing down your interest based on the skills that you have? Because it seems like you found like your home in tech, and then all these startups that you were talking about.
So what, maybe to make it more pertinent to your background, like can you give me more detail on like what you majored in and also what are the kind of things that you're interested in?
Okay, so I'm a physics and math major, and I'm just taking some stats classes on the side because they're relevant to me. And my work is in experimental physics, but I've done a lot of work with theoretical physics and stuff. But I'm like, because I'm trapped in this academic bubble, I don't really see any pathways out, how to use all these skills I learned with like all the topology and abstract algebra, advanced differential equations, and and the whole computational physics track I had to take. And like, I need to think about how to better formulate this, but does that sort of help?
No, it helps. I think also like the level of answers on like, do you have ideas of what you'd be interested in, or it's just even like, how do you even break down, like boil the ocean of like potential directions?
I think typically what I've excelled at is like, I enjoy these sort of theoretical journeys into like topology and like symmetries, and then how that connects to the deeper fundamental physics. But really at the end of the day, it's the cool like stellar models and like gravitational things that we do that like basically all the computational stuff with modeling that we did. That's what I excelled at and really enjoyed doing. And I have an understanding that that's a very useful skill like in vacuum, but because of like resources around me and sort of being in this bubble, how would you go about looking for a way to apply that?
Yeah, I mean, like, I think those skills, like, not only does it translate to obviously like tech in terms of engineering, but also, you know, I haven't had personal experience with management consulting, but like there's, you know, just like a slew of things you can do as long as you just are able to think critically. I think it really depends on, I mean, have you done, first of all, like, it sounds like you've done a lot of things in academia. Like, are you considering academia at all, or you just want to go outside of academia?
I'm leaning towards not going to academia because I've attended conferences and stuff and presented some research that I've been doing at the lab I work at, and I've talked to people in both like the graduate level and like people, PhDs, postdocs, at least within the physics community, and it's kind of this like publisher perish hell that people are trapped in, and it's not for me, at least. So.
And Shankar, for like the rest of the class, is that kind of a similar background? Like most people more theoretically leaning in their?
No, no. I think I mean maybe I think Omkar is at one extreme end of like in terms of strong theoretical skills in areas like physics and stuff. I think yeah, maybe I'm misspeaking, but yeah, I think people have widespread skills. There are lots of majors in statistics and math in general. And some computer science and business school and so on. So yeah, so it's like background is across. But I guess maybe if I paraphrase Omkar, like what you were able to do was you went in with a super theoretical goal at Berkeley, but then from my understanding, you dived headfirst into Pinterest, and then everything else took off after that. So would your recommendation be just dive headfirst and put on your bandages later, or is there any other mechanism to switch gears?
Yeah, I guess I didn't really string together what happened between Pinterest and like logic. But I think a lot of it was also just, you know, there was a growing area in tech called data science. It was just such a natural area for me to explore because it took some of the statistical knowledge and it was, you know, trying to, it was such a new area too. Like it's not very obvious what data scientists did, at least in the beginning. But it was about like applying these like analytical mindset to questions to do with like a startup. And so I think similarly, just, I mean, how did I start speaking to people in the area? I guess I took advantage of the fact that I was in, you know, like I was in grad school. There's a lot of like ways to just like talk to people, upperclassmen who've been, you know, already down specific paths and kind of reaching out to them and you know, you are definitely asking for a favor, but you're just trying to understand like, okay, why did they make the decision that he did? What does their job look like? And that kind of gives you more points to fill as to like whether it's a good choice for yourself. I think that's probably a thing that is actionable for everyone here because there are like alumni that you can contact probably. And then just trying to think, what else did I do? I mean, I don't even think I went to like career fairs. So it's definitely, I mean, a lot of the people I think in the math PhD ended up doing something else. And so I just ended up reaching out to these people and just figuring out like, first of all, why, which we learned because math academia is brutal. And then two, just like what, they ended up mostly in tech, but some of them actually ended up doing like even management consulting and things like that. And so just figuring that out. A lot of them went to places like Jane Street. And so just figuring out that that's not my cup of tea. But yeah, I think reaching out to people who had similar maybe backgrounds to you so that it's very easy for them to like be able to understand what you're going through. And then they can offer more, I guess, pertinent advice based on how they got into an area that might be interesting for you.
Cool. Thanks.
I have one more question, but if someone else has.
Yeah, so maybe Omkar, maybe we can touch base. I guess we're almost out of time, and then I can, chat with you and maybe Dr. D. So maybe just one more question, and then we really have to, thank Dr. D again. So any more questions?
Yeah, like how do you like startup usually recruit? Because when we graduate, we also often apply to like big names, like we got their websites, we apply to them. But it's really a good choice to join
your question,
startup.
what?
Yeah, how to join startup? Like, what's a quick way to found startups and be part of startups? instead
so
of?
the small startups. I would say go to YC's Work for a Startup page. They started that maybe a year ago. It's great. Just apply. You'll be in a database where all of YC startups can see. And that it's a great, and it's like free for, people to apply, free for the YC to use. It's like clearly, building up the community there. So that'd be a great place to start. I can send over a link to Shankar later to pass along to you guys. Yeah. So that part's
Sure.
easy. Yeah. And it's not just like engineering jobs too. I think there's also design jobs in there, mostly like technical-ish. I mean, maybe product will be in there eventually, but they started mainly with engineering. Now they have design.
Cool. Okay, I think we're 1 minute over time. So again, Lisa, thanks so much for 51 minutes actually of your time. This is a lot for no, yeah, it was a pleasure. We had a great time. And
No, thank you for reaching out. And we can share this with David. We can do like a virtual dinner or something maybe.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Fun. Yeah.
Okay, again, thanks. Have a great day. And yeah, thank you.
Have a great day, everyone. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.